Welcome to Massanutten Regional Library's online book talk. I'm Mr. Randy. We're going to be looking at 4 books today, and each book has something to do with our feelings and our heart and how we interact with the world. The first book we're going to look at today is Ravis Roar by Tom Percival. At the playground, the monkey bars were too high. The gaps between the logs were too wide. But when Ravi wanted to go on the big slide, the man said, "Sorry, son, you're too small." Ravi got so mad that his face turned red. But then Dad said, "Come on, let's get ice cream." Often being the smallest in a family, it's okay. Other times being the smallest in the family is infuriating. Just ask Ravi. His 3 siblings are taller than he is. Even his dog is bigger than Ravi. Guess who comes in last during family foot races? Ravi. Guess who can't find anyone during hide and seek? Ravi. The playground equipment's too tall, too wide for the smallest. No big slide for Ravi. Ravi gets so mad, like we said, his face turns red. He sprouts a tail. He sprouts 2 furry ears, sharp pointy teeth, and stripy orange fur. Ravi turns into a tiger. He takes a huge breath and roars. Being a tiger is great. The tiger can do all the things Ravi can't, like leaping across the playground equipment, going down the big kid slide. But despite the wild roaring, the tiger soon realizes no one wants to play with him. How will the wild tiger handle this consequence? Will he stay wild and roar and run? Or will Ravi regain control of his emotions? I encourage you to read and find out. I think it's a book a lot of younger siblings can relate to. The next book we're going to look at today is Adrian Simcox Does Not Have a Horse by Marcy Campbell. Adrian Simcox sits all by himself, probably daydreaming again. And Adrian Simcox tells anyone who will listen that he has a horse. He insists that he owns a horse, not just any horse, but a beautiful horse with its white coat and golden mane. Chloe, his classmate, does not believe him. How could Adrian Simcox possibly take care of a horse? He can't even take care of his own desk. How could he afford a horse? He eats free lunch and his shoes are holy. Besides, where would he keep a horse? He lives in town. Finally, Chloe, she gets so upset and she's had enough of hearing about this horse business, and she calls him out on it in front of the other children. When she calls him out on it, this visibly saddens Adrian. Chloe complains to her mother about Adrian's lying. The mother, instead of taking sides or preaching, takes Chloe for a walk into a different part of town than they usually travel. They end up in Adrian's neighborhood. When they see Adrian and his grandfather outside, they stop to chat. I would encourage everyone to read the book and find out how this chat unfolds and if it changes some of Chloe's feelings towards Adrian. It's definitely a worthwhile read. The next book we're going to look at is Michael Rosen's Sad Book. This powerful picture book chronicles the author's journey of sadness that follows the death of his mother and teenage son, Eddie. It opens with an illustration of a smiling Rosen pretending to be happy because he's afraid people will not like him. They won't like him if he wears his sadness on his sleeve. Sometimes his sadness is big and overwhelming and everywhere. Sometimes sad is very big. It's everywhere, all over me. Then I look like this, and there's nothing I can do about it. What makes me most sad is when I think about my son Eddie. He died, and I loved him very, very much. But he died anyway. When his sadness gets this large, he can't muster up a smile. He also, throughout the book, acknowledges his anger over the loss of his son. Sometimes he wants to find someone to talk about this with and share his sadness. Other times he wants to hold it and think about it on his own. Occasionally his sadness makes him act out with strange behaviors like banging his spoon on the table. Often his sadness cannot be defined. Other times his sadness is pointed and focused, and he realizes he is sad because his family is not the same anymore. Eventually he finds ways to be sad that don't hurt as much. Every day he does one thing he can be proud of. He accepts the fact that he is sad, and he realizes sad is not bad. Everyone has sad stuff. Eventually, his fond memories of his son and mother, they find their way to the surface. The strength of this book lies in Rosen's willingness to acknowledge his sadness in its rawest, most vulnerable state. It doesn't pretend that sadness is neat and tidy. While it's not a book I would choose for a general storytime read aloud, I have used it one-on-one with a child experiencing loss, and I'll do so again if the need arises. So if you're in that position where you need a book that deals with what loss feels like and ways to handle it, I would suggest Michael Rosen's Sad Book. The last book we're going to take a look at is Sam's Pet Temper by Sangeeta Bhadra. Sam was tired of waiting. Waiting made him mad. He got madder and madder and madder until he's the maddest he had ever been in his whole life. The book opens with Sam waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting his turn on a very crowded playground. Finally, all that waiting made him madder and madder until he was the maddest he'd ever been in his whole life. Suddenly, something jumps among the kids, shoving, tripping, pinching, and stomping. Sam had never seen anything like it before, but instinctively he knew it was a temper. At first, the temper seems like a helpful pet. It clears the playground, so Sam doesn't need to wait. Sam invites the temper home with him. Once at home, the temper begins more and more trouble, and he almost becomes more trouble than he's worth. It slams the door and kicks the wall. During supper, the temper kicks Sam's sister and dumps Sam's plate of spaghetti on the floor. After Sam is sent to his room, the temper messes up Sam's toys and pillows. Luckily, in the morning, the temper was not in the house, but he sees it waiting at the curb. Sam tries to ignore the temper, but it follows him. At school, the temper continues to wreak havoc around Sam. At last, the principal calls Sam's mother. Sam has to go home early, but the temper hangs on the roof of the car. Finally, Sam gets permission to go to the park on Saturday. He pleads and pleads for his temper to leave him alone. Sam gets angry, but this time angry with his temper. Sam clutches his temper while slowly counting to 10. Temper squirms. Sam says his alphabet backwards to calm his temper. The temper growls and snarls. Sam holds on even tighter. Sam tells the temper, "I'm stronger than you." And closes his eyes. Take a deep breath. And he blows the temper away. He notices later that the temper is over beside a toddler in a stroller who's starting to get a little agitated. By the end of the story, Sam realizes what to do if a temper ever visits him again. I encourage you to check out Sam's Pet Temper.